Today is Monday, August 24th, 2026, and it's National Waffle Day. And this one actually has a reason for landing on August 24th. On this date in 1869, Cornelius Swartwout received a patent for an improved stovetop waffle iron. His big innovation was a handle that let you open and flip the iron without burning your hand, which suggests the previous method of making waffles involved breakfast and a minor workplace injury. But today, we've got a man who covered himself in porpoise oil before spending almost 22 hours in the English Channel. A 6-minute song that was supposedly too strange for radio, and the day Pluto found out that being a planet was apparently something you could lose in a meeting. So let's begin with Captain Matthew Webb, a man who looked at the stretch of cold, crowded water between England and France and thought, I'll swim it. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone who apparently spends an unhealthy amount of time wandering through historical rabbit holes so you don't have to. Matthew Webb wasn't known as an especially fast swimmer. He was known for something that turned out to be far more useful. He could keep going. Webb had grown up near England's River Severn, joined the merchant navy as a boy, and developed a reputation for being unusually comfortable in the water. Then he read about someone's failed attempt to swim across the English Channel. Most people would read that story and think, well, that explains why nobody does it. Webb took it as a suggestion. The straight-line distance between Dover and Calais is only about 21 miles, but the tides don't care about your straight line. They push swimmers sideways, pull them away from shore, and can turn a 21-mile crossing into something closer to 38. Webb trained in cold water and made his first attempt on August 12, 1875. Bad weather forced him to quit. Less than 2 weeks later, he came back. At 12:56 in the afternoon on August 24th, Webb stood at Admiralty Pier in Dover wearing a red silk swimming costume. Before entering the water, he coated his body in porpoise oil, which was supposed to protect him from the cold. I don't know whether it provided much insulation, but it definitely made him the least appealing item on any nearby shark menu. Webb dove in and began swimming towards France. He mainly used the breaststroke, slow, steady, and much easier to maintain than trying to sprint for an entire day. Escort boats stayed nearby, but he wasn't allowed to touch them or use any artificial support. When he needed food, the crews passed it to him while he remained in the water. And by food, I mean beef tea, coffee, cod liver oil, ale, and brandy. So his channel crossing nutrition plan was somewhere between a Victorian hospital and a very questionable pub lunch. He swam through the afternoon, through the night, and into the following morning. He battled strong currents, seaweed, exhaustion, and a jellyfish sting. When he finally reached the French coast, the tide held him offshore for hours. France was right there, but the water kept refusing to let him have it. At 10:41 in the morning of August 25th, after 21 hours and 45 minutes in the channel, Webb reached the sand near Calais. He had become the first known person to swim the English Channel without artificial assistance. The man who wasn't considered particularly fast had completed the crossing because he was extraordinarily difficult to stop. And 50 years later, another group of people discovered that sometimes the thing everyone thinks is too long is exactly the thing nobody forgets. By 1975, Queen had already released 3 albums and scored several hits. But financially, the band was in trouble. They owed money. They were unhappy with their old management, and they knew their 4th album needed to succeed. Then Freddie Mercury brought in a song. Well, parts of a song. There was a ballad, a heavy rock section, an operatic explosion, and a quiet ending. Mercury had the structure in his head, but when he first played pieces of it for the band, he would reportedly stop at the gap and explain, "This is where the opera section comes in," which is a wonderfully confident thing to say when the opera section does not yet exist. On August 24, 1975, Queen began recording Bohemian Rhapsody at Rockfield Studios in Wales. There were no digital files, no unlimited tracks. No button that could instantly duplicate a vocal or undo the last mistake. Brian May, Roger Taylor, and Freddie Mercury had to record their voices repeatedly, layering one part over another to create the enormous choir in the middle of the song. Galileo, another layer. Figaro, another layer. Magnifico. Again and again until 3 singers sounded like an entire opera company had wandered into a rock studio. The finished song ran 5 minutes and 55 seconds. It had no traditional chorus, changed musical styles several times, and contained words like Scaramouche and Bismillah. People in the music business warned that radio stations wouldn't play something that long. Cutting it down was suggested, but Queen refused. So the band gave an advance copy to radio personality Kenny Everett, supposedly with instructions not to play it. Everett played it anyway. Then he played it again. Listeners began calling the station and asking where they could buy the record, which was a slight problem, because it hadn't been released yet. Bohemian Rhapsody was eventually released uncut. It reached number 1 in Britain and stayed there for 9 weeks. The song that was too long for radio became so famous that decades later, Queen's entire movie biography borrowed its name. And Bohemian Rhapsody became more than a song title. It became the name of a movie, a cultural landmark, and something millions of people can perform confidently right up until the lyrics become Italian astronomy. Which brings us, oddly enough, to actual astronomy. For most of the 20th century, the solar system had 9 planets. Then astronomers began finding objects beyond Neptune that looked suspiciously similar to Pluto. One of them, eventually named Eris, appeared large enough that scientists faced an uncomfortable question. If Pluto was a planet, why wasn't Eris? In 2006, the International Astronomical Union gathered in Prague to settle the issue by creating an official definition of the word planet. The first proposal didn't remove Pluto. It would have expanded the solar system to 12 planets. Ceres, the largest object in the asteroid belt, would regain the planetary status it had briefly held in the 19th century. Pluto's moon Charon would become a planet because the 2 bodies orbit a point in space between them. Eris would join the list as well. And that might have been only the beginning. Other round objects could have qualified later, giving school children a planetary mnemonic that needed its own appendix. So the astronomers kept debating. On August 24, 2006, they adopted a definition with 3 requirements. A planet has to orbit the sun, be massive enough to pull itself into a nearly round shape, and have cleared the neighborhood around its orbit. Pluto passed the first 2. It failed the neighborhood inspection. Because Pluto shares its region with many other icy objects, it was reclassified as a dwarf planet. The solar system dropped from 9 planets to 8. Only 424 members were present at the final voting session, which means Pluto lost its job before a group smaller than the graduating class of many high schools. Nothing about Pluto itself changed. It was still round. It still had moons. It continued moving through space exactly as it had before. We just changed the label. And while Pluto was removed from one famous group, today's birthday became part of another one while he was only 11. He had no professional acting experience. Mostly, he had performed in school plays and read the books that were about to become one of the largest film franchises in history. When he heard about an open casting call, he made an audition video. He didn't simply read a scene. First, he dressed as his female drama teacher. Then he performed a rap he had written explaining why he should get the role. Honestly, if an 11-year-old is brave enough to do that on camera, you at least call him back. He won the part and spent the next decade playing the red-headed best friend in 8 enormously successful movies. He grew up on screen alongside Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson, facing giant spiders, escaped prisoners, evil wizards, and the constant danger of being asked to follow Hermione's instructions. As an adult, he used some of his film earnings to fulfill a childhood dream by buying an ice cream van. He also appeared in Ed Sheeran's Lego House video, playing an obsessed fan who looks enough like Sheeran to make the whole thing slightly confusing. Born on August 24, 1988, today's birthday is Rupert Grint, better known to millions of people as Ron Weasley. And can we acknowledge that nobody needed to give him a wizard name? Rupert Grint already sounds like someone Professor McGonagall would call on during attendance. Today's stories all involve somebody else deciding what was possible, acceptable, or properly classified. Matthew Webb kept swimming. Queen kept all 6 minutes. And Pluto kept orbiting whether the committee approved of it or not. Sometimes the label changes. The actual thing underneath it doesn't. Anyway, Pluto may no longer belong to the Planet Club, but I doubt it's losing much sleep over the membership card. And as Groucho Marx wrote, I don't want to belong to any club that will accept me as a member. If you'd like to explore more of my work, books, narration, or ongoing historical curiosity, you can find it all at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and I'm glad you were here for this one. I'll see you tomorrow.